Everything in the physical world is being projected from the spiritual world. And there are times that this projection is something that we can easily resonate with or understand or think of, maybe even on our own. But then sometimes it's very fascinating, it's very interesting, things that you wouldn't think of. In this case today, we're going to speak about one of those. That's the concept of a kiss. If you think about it, it's a very fascinating thing how kissing is such an ingrained part of the human experience. It's such a part of a loving relationship. It's a part of camaraderie. It's a part of companionship. It can mean a lot of different things. And stam, when you just look at humanity, we don't even think about it. I mean, we kiss because we kiss. But why do we kiss with our mouths? You know? Why don't we bump heads? And you might think that's a bizarre question, but if you really looked at it, it's a bizarre act. Why do we kiss each other? You know? Where did that come from? We're going to learn it has a lot to do with the mouth. That because of the spiritual roots of the mouth and the spiritual roots of breath, that this is the reason why kissing is an essential part of a loving relationship on a basic level. And what is a kiss spiritually, which is even deeper. So Rabbi Nachman says like this: when a person learns with kedusha, with holiness, with tahara, and with purity, is a din ufsak. He learns some type of law, some type of halachic expounding. Shechidash eze tana or tzadik acher. That this tana, that this tzaddik, this great sage, that he originated. Through this is created the concept of kisses. What is a kiss? Rabbi Nachman says a kiss is the binding, it's the attachment of one spirit with another spirit. One life force with another life force. They're cleaving to each other. They're binding to each other. They're attaching to each other. They're uniting. Spirit with spirit, life force with life force. That's what a kiss is. And Rabbi Nachman says that when a person learned the Torah of a Tsarik, or he learns the teachings of a great Talmid Chacham, not the Shade Yehudi version, the one who's learning for the wrong reasons, but the one who's learning for the right reasons, the one who's teaching for the right reasons. When a person learns that person's Torah, and that person himself has reached a level of purity, of clarity, of intentionality, of depth of heart, of truth, then he creates this spiritual entity called kissing. Because this psak, this halachic decision of a certain sage, this codification of Jewish law, or this very deep novelty in understanding of the Torah or Jewish mysticism, which comes from these great tzaddikim who we learned in the past, what's called the upper tzaddik, the transcendent tzaddik. That teaching is not just his intellectual output. That teaching is what's called his speech. And his dibur hu achiyut. His speech is his life force. So this is a very deep concept. Rabbi Nachman brings in the second Torah of Likutey Moharan that the life force of Mashiach is speech. And that the tzaddik of every generation is the Bechina of Mashiach. So what does it mean it's his life force? So when we learned it in the past, we learned that he draws his own life force by talking. However, what we're learning here is that his own speech is his life force, is his ruach, it's his energy, it's his essence, so to speak. It's his essential self being expressed and projected. And so why does that matter to us? Because when we're trying to connect to real tzaddikim, which Rabbi Nachman says is the key to redemption, both personally and collectively, the reason is because you're drawing his chiyut, you're drawing his life force. His life force is what's infusing you. Like in the 8th Torah of Likutey Moharan, Rabbi Nachman says, it's the life force of the Tsarik, it's the breath of the Tsarik that is infusing the Jewish soul. It is uplifting and elevating all of the good within it, and it's dispelling and it's abrogating all of the negativity inside of it. All from the ruach of the great tzaddik, of the great spiritual master. What we're learning here is called the Tsarik Elyon, this upper transcendent tzaddik who brings Torah Navale. He originates new insights into spiritual and psychological phenomenon. And when he creates these new insights, which are truly original, which are truly insightful, which are truly groundbreaking, and you learn those teachings, and you yourself, even though you're not on that level, you're not the Tzadik Elyon, but if you're learning for the right reasons, and you've reached a certain level of purity of heart, and you've reached a certain level of doing it for the right reasons, then in that sense, Rabbi Nachman says, you automatically become the Tzadik Tachton. You become what's called the lower Tzadik. And even though you're not creating new teachings, when you're learning those teachings, and your keli, your vessel, is it's shaped and it's molded into a pure, empty vessel, which can reflect and illuminate the light which is entering into it, then you're actually drawing his life force, and that's what you're projecting. That's what you're living with. And for us that we're trying to figure out how do we connect to tzaddikim, especially to Rabbi Nachman that he passed away, so Rav Natan says that when you learn the teachings of a tzaddik, like Rabbi Nachman, and you say it over, you're literally attaching to him. You're having devekut with him. You're drawing his life force. Where does that come from? It comes right here. It comes from this Torah. That this is the source, and this is the true value of why it's so important to learn the teachings of great tzaddikim after you are trying to work on yourselves, and while you're trying to work on yourselves. Why is that beneficial for you? How do we still achieve what we hope to achieve even when Rabbi Nachman's not here, through his very deep, very novel teachings, which are so transformative? And the answer is by kissing him. By kissing him. By kissing the tzaddik. How do you kiss the tzaddik? How do you attach your life force with his life force? By speaking over his teachings. Because when you speak over his teachings, those teachings are what's called his dibur, his speech. And his speech is his life force. So when you say over the teachings of the tzaddik to yourself, when you say over those teachings to others, you're kissing the tzaddik. And when you kiss someone, you're intermingling life forces, which is good for us. Because his ruach is pure. His ruach is powerful. His ruach can shake out all of the negativity within you. His ruach can draw out all of the fallen aspects of the soul and elevate all of the positive parts of you that are in hiding, that are in concealment, that are in potential. That is the koach of the ruach. Like when Rabbi Nachman's students had first visited him for the first time, and they were all taken aback by his koach, his power, his awesomeness, that when they heard him teach Torah, they were gripped with the intensity in which he was giving it over, the powerful, transformative nature of his teachings, the originality of his personality and his wisdom. It was just a new world. And they felt that this was going to be a new world for them. And yet when they went back to try and live with these teachings, even though they knew it would be so good for them, they were met with such opposition. And obviously, if you just form a relationship with somebody, no matter how amazing you think this new opportunity is, if you're immediately hit by a lot of negative feedback, a lot of opposition, a lot of conflict, especially from people that you think care about you, you feel care about you, want the best for you, it's very hard to hold strong in the face of that. And back then, they didn't have cell phones, and they didn't have modern forms of communication. They didn't have quick taxis that they can get into. They didn't have planes. They didn't have cars, right? So they weren't able to allay their anxiety and their worries by going to Rabbi Nachman right after they met with him and had this transformative experience. They had to wait months before they saw him again. Yet they were living on their own with these teachings in their life in such a deep, such a profound, such an authentic way. Everyone around them could see it because it was on their face, it was in their movements, it was in their speech, it was in their actions. It was totally different now. And it drew a lot of not just ire from people, it just drew a lot of response, because obviously the teachings are not just dealing with, let's say, intellectual inquiry. It literally is something that affects every part of your being, your psyche, your emotions, your actions, everything. So everybody saw it right away. And when they came back to him after a few months, and he gave one of his first discourses, trying to convey to them what Rabbi Nachman was trying to do for them, they said to him, all the pain and all the suffering that they had been going through since trying to live with these teachings. And Rabbi Nachman responded to them with the 8th Torah of Likutey Moharan, the 8th lesson of Likutey Moharan. And then he finished by telling them, if anybody asks you, why do you come to me? Why are you visiting Breslov? What did you find in Breslov that you feel is so transformative that you're willing to change everything in your life to take this with you and to bring it to everyone around you? He said, tell them Ruach. When they ask you what you found in Breslov, tell them Ruach. I found life. I found breath. I found life force. I found energy. I found a new tune to sing. A new step to walk. Ruach. And that life force, that Ruach, how do you take hold of it? You do it by saying over the teachings of the Tsarik, by learning those teachings with Kedusha and Tahara, with holiness and purity. And when you do that, you actually kiss the Tsarik. You take your life force and you mix it with his life force, and it becomes intermingled. And when you do that, that's what elevates your own life force. And this is what we're looking to do. This is what we're trying to do. Because the Pasak, the final decision in terms of Jewish law, that the Tana, that the Chacham, the wise man, comes up with, this original idea of Jewish law, that's his speech. That's his chiyut. And it says in Bereshit, lenefesh chaya. Man became a nefesh chaya, a soul that was alive. And Onkelos, who was really the first commentator of the Torah, even though it was a translation, but it's really a commentary, Onkelos says there, and it's maybe the most famous Onkelos that there is, L'ruach mamala. What does it mean when Hashem created man? He created humanity. What is it that made humanity different from the rest of creation, from the rest of reality? That he was L'ruach mamala. He was a speaking spirit. That as opposed to the rest of creation, that if it's inanimate, there's no communication at all. There's no movement. But then there's something called vegetation, which has more movement, but still no communication. And then all of a sudden, there's the animal life, which has more movement and some level of communication, but not speech. And then all of a sudden there's man, the final created entity of reality. And what really makes man different from anyone else? And this is very deep and very beautiful, and something that we really have to contemplate, because it's so fundamental to us actually finding wholeness in our life. Because the only way to find wholeness in one's life is to be who you are. And if you don't know who you are, you can't be that thing. So who are you? You are a speaking spirit. You are a speaking soul. Your essence is speech. Your life force is speech. And you can even see this in a simple way. You know, if you talk to your friends, you feel more alive. When you have conversations with others that are valuable, that are worthwhile, it lights you up. It lights the other person up through speech. It doesn't happen when you just look at them. Not usually, unless they're a great Tsarik. It comes by speaking. Rabbi Nachman says that a person needs to be busy with speaking out hibodedut, speaking out personal prayer, speaking out tefillah when you are praying, even in a communal way, to speak out when you learn Torah. Say it out loud. And this is not a chiddush of Rabbi Nachman. This was by Chazal, that the whole benefit of Torah learning comes when you speak it out. But it all comes back to this original point that Unkelos is bringing out at the very beginning, the inception of humanity. What is it to be human? To talk, to speak. You know, you could see in the world of psychology, in the world of therapy, the value of speech. People can be so sick emotionally and spiritually, just because they don't feel they can express themselves. And by having a therapy session every week where they talk and they express themselves, and there's a person there who's facilitating their expression of self for the first time in their life, through this alone they heal. Even though all of the things that they've been through, it didn't change. Nothing changed, except they're talking. They're speaking now. And Rabbi Nachman was machaven to this 200 years before Freud, 200 years before the Viennan psychotherapy world was developed. That Rabbi Nachman said, do you know why we're sick? Because the Arizal said that the whole entire exile in Mitzrayim was an exile of speech. And even though Arizal was speaking about that in a Kabbalistic sense, Rabbi Nachman says, mamish, it's just when you don't talk, when you don't express yourself, that's exile. And sickness is not just a spiritual phenomenon. Sickness is coming from exile of the soul. It's coming from exile of self, exile of speech. Because a person is speech. He is his speech. Like King David said, Ani tefillah, who am I? I am prayer. I am tefillah. I am speech. And the reason why when we say Tehillim, we resonate so deeply with it. And it transforms our day and our life, and it gives us hope on a day-to-day basis. And it makes us feel that we're alive, and it makes us feel understood, and it makes us feel hopeful. Is because King David represents the Mashiach, and King David represents the Shekhinah. He represents the feminine expression of godliness, the only revelation of Hashem that we have in this physical world while we're in exile, the one who stayed here with us, the princess. And he represents the archetypal soul of the Jewish people, Knesset Yisrael, like is spoken about in the Zohar. David is Knesset Yisrael. And that's the reason why anybody hears the stories about King David, or when anybody reads Tehillim, they feel like they're speaking about themselves, because it is you. Because he is the living manifestation of the archetype of Knesset Yisrael, of the soul of the Jewish people, the archetypal, unified soul of the Jewish people. And what does David say? Ani tefillah, I am prayer, I am speech. That means we're also speech. Your speech, you are speech. So why is it that we feel so sick? Why is it that we feel so confused? Why is it that we feel so unfulfilled? Why is it that we feel so trapped? Because speech is in exile. Because you're in exile. Because I'm in exile. Because the Tsarik is in exile. Hashem is in exile. Speech is in exile. And so Rabbi Nachman says, open up your mouth. Talk. Say out words of truth, and your whole life is going to change. Speak out the words of a real spiritual master, and you'll see that all the darkness in your life will fade away, because you'll be kissing the Tsarik. You're going to be intermingling life forces with this great spiritual master who has completely eviscerated all negativity within himself through tremendous hishtadlut, through tremendous effort on a daily, minute to minute, hour to hour, second to second, literally rega to rega basis that Rabbi Nachman was known. He didn't take one moment off. Every moment of his life, his students said he was brand new. Rabbi Nachman himself said that if I am not a completely new person tomorrow, I have no reason to be here. He lived like that. He didn't watch motivational videos of celebrities who spoke about it in a TED Talk or in some type of YouTube video, and all of a sudden is super inspired for like an hour. And even though that person is doing, besides that speech, horrifying things that you would never show to your kids because you have no interest in them turning out like that. They came up with this one thing in which they've realized after 40 years of living in a superficial, artificial, plastic world, they found some deep insight through the pain of living like that. But then you have a tzaddik. You have a person who since his birth, growing up in the house of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, growing up in the house of the one who changed Judaism until the Mashiach comes, that every day he was having people come and visit their home, speaking over stories of his great-grandfather who passed away a couple years before he was born, about how he was the most transformative figure since the Arizal, since the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, since Moshe Rabbeinu, until the Mashiach comes. And he heard about this every day. And he said this affected him more than anything. This lit him up more than anything. He had no interest in being a normal kid after that. He was only desiring to achieve all of his spiritual potential and to help everybody reap the fruit of that. To become a master of the field, to become a true shepherd. And when we learn his teachings, when we say them over, when we speak them over in our hibodedut, in our personal prayer, when we say them over to our friends in order to encourage them or encourage ourselves by speaking it over to them, you are kissing the tzaddik. And every time that you kiss the tzaddik, you're drawing his life force into your life force. And the more you do it, the more you draw that pure, holy, illuminate, brilliant life force into yourself. And it brings out every good part of you and expels every negative part of you. But that's only when you're learning it from a pure, holy place. And so I want to encourage everybody, how do I practically apply this in my life? You have the zchut, I have the zchut. We don't have to start the whole thing over again. We don't have to create a brand new program. Rabbi Nachman spent his whole life toiling, sacrificing every moment of his being, trying to create a new path, a path that's going to bring the Mashiach, a path that's going to bring our personal redemption and geula, our personal transformation. We don't have to create a new path anymore. We can breathe. Do it with me. We don't have to do it. It's amazing. It's been done. The path has been paved. We just have to have the courage to walk it. But how do we walk it in a way which brings life to us? We need to try to turn our personal vessel into one which is clear, into one which is big. one which can contain and hold such a beautiful light, which can reflect it. And the way you do it is through kedusha and tahar, is through holiness and purity. What are some practical ways to achieve holiness and purity? If you're a man, it's going to the mikveh on a daily basis. If you're a Jew, it's through hibodedut. It's through pouring your heart out to Hashem like a child speaking to his Abba about his deepest yearnings in his life, about his deepest dreams in his life, about his failures, about his lackings, about his positive qualities, about his inner strength, and not giving up on that every day, no matter how difficult it is and how challenging it is. All of that creates a more holy, pure vessel. And even if it feels like you're experiencing that you're not being answered, you don't know how holy you're making yourself by doing this. You don't know how pure you're making yourself by doing this. How humble you're making yourself by doing this. You do this by learning for the right reasons. That I'm learning to get closer to Hashem. I'm not learning to impress somebody. I'm not learning to look a certain way in front of somebody. I'm learning literally that I should achieve the purpose of my life and to help others do the same. That makes you holy. That makes you pure. When you act and engage in acts of selflessness for the Jewish people, when you sacrifice yourself for other Jews to try to help them, even when it's not beneficial for you, but you do it anyway because you love, because you care, because the Jewish people are more meaningful for you than your own personal individual self. When you live like that and you have Mesir Nefesh in that way, when you go and you try and spread the teachings of Rabbi Nachman to try to help other people, even though you're getting negative feedback and even though you're getting challenged and even if you're getting harangued and you're getting ostracized, you do it anyway. It's making you so holy and so pure. Everything that Rabbi Nachman said to do makes you so holy and so pure. Like Rabbi Nachman said, I only wanted that you guys should be like wild animals in the forest, screaming out to Hashem, and yet you all became tzaddikim. Because the teachings of Rabbi Nachman and the advice of Rabbi Nachman makes you so holy and so pure. So go pick up your local copy in English of advice. Go pick up your local copy of Likutey Etzot. Learn Rabbi Nachman's practical advice that comes from his teachings in Likutey Moharan and Seichot Haran. And apply them in your life. Even when it's difficult, even when it's challenging. This is going to make you so holy and so pure, and don't give up on it. And when you do this and you learn and you say over his teachings in tefillah to your friends when you're learning, you literally draw the life force of the Tsarik inside of you. And you're kissing him. And that kiss can change your whole life. B'ezrat Hashem, next time we're going to learn more about where we see this type of kiss in the Torah. This type of transformative kiss. This life-changing kiss. There is one very special kiss that we learn about in the Torah between a Jewish man and a Jewish woman. And what we're going to learn is that in a very deep way, this is the same paradigm for us and the Tsarik Emes and this upper Tsarik. And not to think to yourself, again, this is a very big misconstrued reality. That people think, where am I in this whole picture? If I'm connecting to such a big Tsarik, so then what am I? I'm just nothing? No, Rabbi Nachman says, you're the Tsarik Tachton. You're also a Tsarik, but you're on the receiving end. But you're still a Tsarik. But with Hashem, we should all become tzaddikim. We should all become tzaddikim on the level of tachton, holy and pure, and to be able to kiss the Tsarik. And that kiss changes our whole life.